You are listening to Mr Apex Podcast. We love MotoGP. Hello and welcome to Mr Apex MotoGP Podcast. This is a show put together by MotoGP fans pretending to be experts. We aim to have a race review show ready for a midweek commute. We may just be punters, but we love to talk. Well, it's over already. The comeback is complete. To the surprise of nobody, Marc Marquez clinched an historic 9th world title in emotional scenes and celebrations in Japan. But the future prospect of exciting title battles took a huge leap forward as Mr Bagnaia appeared to have finally found that elusive silver bullet. As ever, I am your host, Kyle Power, and today I am joined in the virtual shed by some fellow MotoGP enthusiasts. Banished back to the dock of the co-host seat, facing crimes of doing too good a job replacing the main host and crimes against podcasting, it's Jules Seegers. How's it going, Jules?
Hi, Kyle. Thanks. And did anyone mention something about a comeback this weekend? If not, let's talk about that.
I hadn't heard of one at all. We're also joined by the tyre-obsessed trumpeter, Matt Trumpets. How's it going, Matt?
Personally, I cannot believe Ducati made the huge mistake of accidentally giving Bagnaia Marquez bike this weekend.
Oh, yeah, conspiracies are out already.
They gave him the race-winning bike. Oops, sorry about that.
They swapped. I was going to go down that road, but you just went straight there. Somebody who likes a bit of a conspiracy every now and then is our smooth-talking Texan, Adam Rosales. How's it going, Adam?
Hey, doing good. Love watching the Japan race because it's actually like a Saturday night race here in Texas, so it's a lovely little weekend. I love it.
Oh, of course, yeah, because you guys are unfortunate enough for the European season to have some pretty gnarly timed races. So yeah, it must be nice for you. It's not nice for us in the UK, but I guess we can give a couple away every now and then, can't we? So
exactly.
Weekend overview going in then. Of course, it's been well publicised. This was the first championship match point for Marc Marquez. He only needed 3 points more than his brother Alex. But there was a lot of talk about the post-Misano test when Fabio Quartararo got his hands on the Yamaha V4 and was less than enamoured with it. But the big news was that Mr Bagnaia finds another solution and his silver bullet, and was very happy with it and reckons it could be the answer to all of his problems. But I'm not sure many people were kind of believing him. We'll believe it when we see it, and boy did we see it. And another little side plot was Liberty Media making their first sort of semi-unwanted marks on the sport by trying to erase the relevance of Moto3 and Moto2. Boo, get stuffed, Liberty. Nobody's having any of that nonsense, thankfully. So the championship scenario. Marc has a massive lead. I'm not going to go too much into the points. He's almost clinched the title, but the battle for P3 is hotting up between Bagnaia and Marco Bezzecchi, with only 8 points between them heading into this round. So, practice and qualifying. And Jules, what a strong start for Bagnaia.
It was, and it was not only a confirmation of what he said that he hoped to have found in the post-Misano test, but also Fridays were never really his strongest point when he was feeling great and when he was on a great bike. So to like immediately stamp his authority on this track and on the timing screens was pretty extraordinary and hopeful to see.
Yeah, absolutely. Like a great point. Like, I think he's only ever led like 3 FP1s ever, I think, in his career. It's not really one of his strong points. So this was brilliant to see. It was really weird. Bez was struggling, obviously, in the first couple of practice sessions, like with 2 crashes. Jorge Martin was looking really, really quick. But oddly, Marc and Alex both looked like they were struggling. And for obvious reasons with Marc, he just looked a bit tight. So, Adam, from a rider's point of view, when you've got stuff on your mind, if you're riding tense, surely that must affect your lap time and your ability to flow properly.
100%. That's definitely going to affect you. But you got to remember that these guys are kind of the best at doing this, best at managing. And so you would think that once they put the helmet on, they pull in the clutch and, go down pit lane, that they just kind of go into not necessarily muscle memory, but into, riding mode. And some of that stuff has to go out the window. But then Run plans are also complicated. I can't imagine what they have to process while riding a bike. I don't imagine anybody who had the mental capacity during practice to kind of drift off into their negative spiral, but we're not them. So yeah, there's a lot going on.
Yeah, well, one of the things that I really do enjoy about this is that you're right. We are not them. They have a degree of skill and mastery that most humans on the planet never really find. But what I love about it is even Marquez, and if there's anyone you would look to and say they have such fortitude. They're just unshakable in their belief in themselves. I feel like even this weekend, he's like, yes, but you know what? I'm still a human being. And you can see under that extreme pressure. And I think this especially comes because it's not just him winning when he's healthy and he's out there and he's doing it. This is him having to prove to himself for the first time that he's actually capable of it. And I don't think he's ever been in that situation before. And even though he holds up so well under the pressure, you can still see that even the best in the world, there's some degradation at that ultimate level that is visible. And we hadn't seen it all season, but it showed up a little bit there. And honestly, it just kind of makes you like him more.
Like you could see it, because getting through to Q2 directly was a bit of a struggle. He was languishing down the timesheets in practice, and he had to put it all on the line for his very final lap. And the people who did put it all on the line were Jorge Martin, Ayagura and Alex Marquez, who all ended up on identical lap times and all just missing out going through to Q2. So it was a monster Q2. It was Bezu's fastest in practice in the end. But Adam, the Q2 session we talked about, that was an epic session.
Yeah, so it was really cool actually being able to watch all the sessions live, and I touched on that a little while ago, but that allowed me to really pay attention to everything. It wasn't at a weird time where I was falling asleep. And Q2 was probably the most exciting session of the season so far. It's like the track had so much progression and evolution that you just didn't know who was going to be on pole. It's like you would think, oh, this guy's about to set the lap record, and he just went, red. But then down, halfway back down the lap, every other rider's doing the same thing, and they're still going 0.2 faster than the last person. It almost made no sense. But I feel like with this circuit, maybe the pavement, the weather really worked out this weekend. We did get a little bit of spots of rain, but nothing crazy. I feel like the track was able to evolve throughout the weekend in a really positive way. And so, yeah, Q2 was just epic. It was such a good session. I didn't know who was going to get pole. And, yeah, I'm not sure what else to touch on.
Yeah, you made a good point there with the weather. It was really, really hot, but this is one of the first Motegi weekends we've had which hasn't been interrupted by rain. And yeah, absolutely, the track ramp up. It was almost like a Formula One qualifying session to get the Formula One reference out of the way early. It's almost like that, where like the last lap times really, really count, and you don't see that so much in MotoGP. But the track was ramping up, and you're right, that sector one, like you see everyone like the red tiles down the marking screen going at him. It was crazy. Like everyone seemed to gain.
And it was a fine line because this track it's kind of flat, and you got these weird long, almost double apex corners where they really push the front. And so I figured more people were going to crash, but I kept seeing red sector. And it wasn't until the very end of Q2 when Ayagura kind of got screwed over by the yellow flags, and they ended up having to cancel his lap. But which, I don't know, I feel indifferent about that rule. I get it, I see the point, but I don't like how often it ruins laps and can easily ruin a weekend because you're using the same qualifying session for both the sprint and the Grand Prix. So it's even worse that yeah, exactly. There's a lot going on.
Nah, in the defense of the rule, there were particularly for Ayagura, he didn't really look like he backed off that much, and there were marshals in the gravel with a rider on the bike, and you can see it there. So it was slammed up. But no, I completely understand you. It seems a bit unfortunate and a bit harsh. Wasn't there someone earlier on in the year? Wasn't it Bagnaia, I think, got screwed up by a false yellow flag that was out and had to give his lap up? That may have actually been in Thailand. I think it might have been Thailand in round one where he got a false yellow flag and it screwed up his quali lap. So someone who didn't have their quali lap screwed up, though, was Johan Mir. On the Honda, a shock P2 behind, I think, a shock pole position for Bagnaia, who was looking quick all weekend, but still, I was sitting there waiting for it to kind of go wrong, as it has done almost all year, and it was so nice to see Bagnaia, Jules, come in there, the first and only rider to ever lap in 1 minute 42 round Motegi.
Yeah, it was, you were kind of waiting for things to unravel for him, because we've seen him having a good Friday or even a good Saturday. So you were kind of waiting for, okay, when is it going to fall apart again? When is this silver bullet not turning out to be silver again? But it didn't, and it was a great quali, as you guys already said. Johan Mir broke the lap record first. And you were like, okay, what's going on here? But then Pecco, he just slammed it, and he was indeed the only rider to break the 143 boundary, so to say. And there he was, and with Johan Mir next to him on P2, and of course for the Honda guys and the home crowd, there wasn't a better place to get that. So it was for Bagnaia. He kind of lucked into that pole position in what was it, Brno? But this one was like on merit. And it promised something that, or he kind of delivered on the promise that he kind of made after the Misano test.
What I find really fun about this, especially with him setting the lap record, is there was just this lovely string, I think starting with Quartararo and then with Mir, of just bike after bike after bike going to it. And then you got Bagnaia coming through. But you know who we're not talking about right now is either of the Marquez brothers, and both of them were having issues. And this is why I said at the top of the show, they swapped the bikes. Both of them were having issues with the front end of their bike and getting it to work properly. And that is such a classic Bagnaia complaint. And so, yeah, it set up this great grid with Bagnaia, who has now shown us over the Friday and Saturday that this isn't just another of his, oh, it feels good for a session and a half, but it doesn't have any staying power. There's something to it here. And then Honda, having quietly pumped up the engine a little bit, bringing all the new parts in, and they're really, really starting to work. And we're just getting this tasty little, we could have like a 3-way, 4-way battle for on both days between manufacturers and riders. So yeah, no, it was a fantastic qualifying.
Yeah, it was looking really good. And you mentioned Honda sort of ramping the engine up a little bit. I'm not sure what they did, but they were actually fastest through all the speed traps, oddly, at the end of the back straight, which I don't think we've seen that all year. So, and you're right pointing out the Marquez brothers. I think it's the first time this year we've seen it wasn't coming easy at all for Mark, and he really struggled to get to third. And that didn't really look like he had anything left. I think he gave everything to get that third place. Brother Alex was really struggling, but someone else who had struggles at the start of the session was Acosta, who he lost most of the session with a technical issue, and he had really good pace throughout the weekend, but he salvaged fourth on the grid behind Mark in third, and Quartararo got fifth, and then Morbidelli in sixth, Matt.
Yeah, and it's worth mentioning the Acosta thing. He wound up having to go out on his second bike, which he hadn't ridden in a while, and had an entirely different setup. The lap that he did on that bike, and it was really his only shot at it, was completely mental because of that. He wasn't used to the bike. He hadn't practiced on the bike, and he just went out there and said, well, okay, we'll see what happens. So, but I think that also set him up for a more challenging weekend too.
Yep, absolutely. And someone who did some mental stuff was somebody we'll talk about now in the sprint review. So on to the sprint review then, and the start of the race, Bagnaia had an awesome hole shot, but let's focus straight in on the big action point, and Jorge Martin making a complete Horlicks of it going into turn one. Guys, who's going to come in first in this? And Matt, it was completely Jorge's fault, surely.
Yeah, sure. Thanks for setting me up there. I mean, in the long run, he will be held responsible for that. And fair enough. He's a grown-up, he's a rider, and you're supposed to be in control of your bike. And honestly, to see it back the first time, I was like, I can't believe they're both still alive. It was that horrifying of a crash, because you're talking full speed bowling ball through the apex of turn one with several rows of riders still coming through with very little ability to evade. And yet somehow, Martin came off the worst with the shattered collarbone, and Bezzecchi, he had a bruised leg and wasn't the happiest of campers, but he just walked away from it. And I'm still like, that's the part of it I still can't figure out, honestly. But Jorge got a lot of stick for this, and I think he might be getting a little bit more than he deserves. Adam?
I think that he was just at the limit, at the wrong place at the wrong time. And this is the way that the bike unsettled going into the braking zone. It seemed like the type of momentum that he would have put himself in the gravel, and unfortunately there was a whole group of riders ahead of him, so he really had nowhere to go. And it reminded me of that incident, I think it was at Barcelona Catalunya a while back, when somebody just went bowling and took out
Nakagami.
It took out a few riders. Or there was one back in the day with Colin Edwards. I can't remember.
Caparossi, wasn't it, as well? And Gibernau going over the front when he hit the brakes.
Yes.
I remember that.
Yeah, those were like 2005 or 6. But yeah, that's what it reminded me of. And Jorge Martin, if he didn't, there was no way he was going to make the corner, even if no riders were there. And so it's all just kind of unfortunate. But I just think that he kind of took a gamble by diving into the inside. But the way that the bikes and the aero kind of pulled everybody into each other, it just seemed like he was just pushing way too much and just being aggressive. And who knows, maybe he's starting to get more comfortable on the bike. He wanted to push a little bit more. And it's a little bit more inviting when you see a gap going into the corner and you feel like you can outbrake the guys that you should be out qualifying. But the fact is that he isn't out qualifying these guys. He's still starting at the back, and maybe he's just in his head a little bit.
That's a good point, because Matt, Jorge had a great pace throughout the weekend. We see in practice he was really, really quick, and I personally think it was a bit desperation. He had the chance, and he's put himself on the inside into the disappearing wedge of doom, where that gap was always going to close.
And I think, now see, this is interesting, because I actually do have a couple of different thoughts, but I just want to talk through what I saw happening, because I was really disturbed by the behavior of his actual motorcycle. We've seen people one-on-one skittle each other through a turn and take both riders out. And it almost never, at least this season, I have never seen a bike behave like his did. So I got, I'd use the word curious about it. And there was a very nice replay. It was the one they did. They gave you the overhead, and then they gave you the backwards looking shot and the forwards looking shot. And for me, mostly I use the overhead as a reference just to figure out what was going on. And because, he's not an inexperienced rider. I could see him taking a chance, but that sort of thing looked to be like such a juvenile error. I was really surprised. And so I think where it all went wrong for him was he got an ungodly start. He got an Apollo rocket kind of a start. He easily leaped the row ahead of him and was halfway to the row ahead of that. And he saw that the biggest space that he could go into was the one furthest to the right. So he's sort of putting himself up and running in a straight line with the point of the pit exit. And now he's obviously got a lot of speed. He's got overspeed on some of the slower starters ahead of him, but he's essentially in a space by himself with a lot of room ahead. And as they come up to where the separation lines stop and you get to the actual pit exit, he and Aldeguer, who had now come over next to him, brake at exactly the same time. If you look, you can see the bike pop up. And this is my first thing where I don't think he was as bad as people think he was. I think he really did start braking at a responsible time. But what happened, and Jules was very good to point this out to me, ahead of them, Miller had come over and was following Digi into the first turn, but he kept on moving over. And as they began to brake, because Miller was going slower, Aldeguer's front wheel had an overlap with Miller's rear, which caused him to react, and that forced Martin to the right. Now, I don't know about you, Kyle, but I'm pretty sure it's hard to maneuver your bike while you're braking. Yeah. So I think here he lets off the brake, and you can see where he was aimed at the point of the pit exit. He winds up in the middle of the pit exit when they actually get there. And he avoids Aldeguer, which is the closest crocodile to his canoe. But now he does have a big problem because he and Aldeguer had both already started the dangle before Miller came over and forced them. So he's already set his weight. He's had to let off the brakes to maneuver. And he looks up, and what does he see? How am I possibly going to stop before this corner? So he grabs the brakes hard, and at this point, his tires aren't lined up. His weight isn't in the right place, and the bike immediately goes into this horrible, I would call it, like, I've had it before on bicycles, like going down really steep. You start to get this wobble if your wheel is unbalanced.
Shake.
Yeah,
and
tank slapper. Yeah.
You can see him. He tries to catch it, and about the third time the rear comes around, he gets it kind of in line. The rear grips, and it just spits him off right into the apex of turn one and right into Motegi. Now, I will agree with you, and I'll agree with Jules, and everyone will agree, that is a risky move to make. But I don't think it was as risky, and I don't think he was as, what's the right word, reckless, as the footage made it appear. And so that's the sum total of my defense here.
Okay, fair enough. Like, the punishment didn't fit the crime, Adam, but like...
which penalty? Did he get a penalty for this?
Not yet.
Not yet. I'll be amazed if he doesn't, to be honest.
Because normally they're really quick with penalties if you take out like half the grid or go skittling through people. And because he only took out his teammate, it's going to be a little different. But I feel like it doesn't really warrant a penalty. I feel like it was a race incident. But yeah, Matt.
It's similar to Quattuaro, isn't it? At Budapest, where he went in, got too late and got a bit buckly on the brakes, Matt.
Yeah, so the official explanation from the stewards was that they were going to not assess a penalty until they could speak to the rider, but because the rider had been hospitalized, the denouement, if you will, of this whole episode is not going to happen until he returns to the racetrack. And if you take the words of his team boss seriously, at this point, I think they almost would prefer him not to come back for the rest of the season and just heal one more time and maybe start riding as a test rider on next year's bike.
Yeah, so I'm in Team Trumpets for this one. I think it looks more violent and more reckless, clumsy than it was, and I feel Jorge has been a bit unlucky here. A combination of being too eager. It's clear that he doesn't feel he belongs in the starting positions where he's at in recent races. He can't get the Aprilia to the one lap pace that we all know that he has from the previous seasons. And maybe a bit too eager. It was clear he moved across the field from his starting position, looking for a gap, and it just didn't work out the way he wanted. And as Matt has tried to explain, he's been caught out by his own machine. Thing is, and I'm glad you mentioned Fabio Quartararo there, Kyle, because when Fabio did his thing in Hungary, it was like, that looks bad. Let's move on. But because it's Jorge, who hasn't done himself any favors this season and who has already had a bit of a reputation of being reckless and being this is not a nice thing to say, but not riding like he's the sharpest tool in the box sometimes. And we all were very surprised how he kept himself composed and collected last season to win that very stressful title fight. I feel that it's a pretty popular thing or take to have a go at Jorge for these things happening. He kind of I don't know the exact English phrase for this, but calls this upon himself a bit.
Yeah.
But there are a lot of people who are not holding back of immediately extra larging that king sizing what happens to him.
That's fair enough. I think why people are jumping on him here though is he harpooned his teammate quite spectacularly here, and it was, I think, the consequences and the outcome of the crash were bad for such a small mistake, and the fact that he's injured himself again, I think people are just like, man, dude, like seriously, like knock it back a little bit.
So I just want to add, Jules brought up one thing that may be worth also considering here. Two things. One, he's not really had a lot of laps on this bike. Two, he's not really settled into it. And that may have also contributed to where he found himself. In the sense that he was riding with an expectation of a bike that didn't wind up performing exactly like he thought. So it was just, that was something I wanted to add on. But I agree with you, Kyle. The result of it was spectacular and hideous, but it did give us a great look at his repaired ribs, which were Frankenstein in nature, if I might say so.
Wow, yeah, that scan picture that he shared on social media was scary, and you could see the damage, the previous damage to his ribs. That was amazing. Fair play to Jorge though. He got airlifted to hospital. He come back and he asked to see Motegi to go through and apologise. And apparently, so I was reading some of the comments from some of the journalists, that he got into the paddock, saw his girlfriend, hugged her, burst into tears, was obviously in a lot of pain, quite worn out, and then went and apologised profusely to Bez, and they're totally cool with each other. So he's completely owned it. He's now flown back to Barcelona to have Dr. Mir operate on him again. So we don't want to see that. We want to see Jorge back and fighting, and it's just a disastrous result. So get well soon, Jorge. A horrible thing, and the punishment did not fit the crime. But with all this going on, we've been rambling on, there was a sprint race going on, and Bagnaia basically did a disappearing act, a run and hide, amazing ride, just shot off at the front and didn't look challenged at any point. Mark was struggling against Acosta, who got into P2, and then he was stuck behind Mir in P3, and he had to put a bit of a brutal move, a block pass on Mir, because he just couldn't pass him, Adam. And it was borderline rude, if not a bit dirty.
Yeah, and I don't know if you guys watched the Super Motocross final last week. I almost thought it was Hayden Deegan on Joe Shimoda having to do just a gnarly block pass, or trying a way to be a little adventurous. But it was quite rude, but it's understandable. There was no contact. It was clean enough.
Yeah, Mir was completely cool about it as well, wasn't he, Matt? Like, he seemed fine. He didn't protest about it too much.
Yeah, and you and I were thinking exactly the same thing. After the race, he basically said, "Oh, that kind of a pass." He's like, "No, that's fine." In fact, at a track like this, it's really the only way to make an overtake stick, because if I'm not entirely missing it, I think Mark had tried once or twice before, and Mir had just absolutely cut back on him. And so the third time he was like, "Okay, well, I have in my bag of tricks this trick. See if you can get around this, buddy." And of course, it was that spectacular motocross style block pass. And no, in fact, he could not. And so that was the end of that.
Yeah, it's another. I feel like it was a trick he learned from the days of fighting against Dovizioso, because Dovi used to do stuff like that. It wasn't quite as aggressive, but it's definitely something that Dovi used to do to him, like closing the throttle, while they're next to each other on the straight, just to mess up their lines.
Again, yeah, and Dovi was very well known for being like the last of the late breakers as well. And I think Mark said this after the race. He was like, I was stuck behind the two worst people to be stuck behind, and that was Acosta and Mir. They brake so late, and when you brake next to them, they just release the brakes, and you've got to keep going in. So Mark was obviously going wide, and I think he said in the car, you know, that thing where they're driving them to like the podium all around, and you can see the car thing, and he said, I had to take risks. And you can see he really was not comfortable with taking risks, and he didn't want to take any risks, but he had to get through. So eventually he gets through on Mir. He then manages to do Acosta doesn't even need a block pass. He gets it pulled up because I think Acosta starts to struggle and loses his pace quite a lot. So Bagnaia's already up the road. Bagnaia goes and a brilliant sprint win. And for a sprint race, Bagnaia to win a sprint race is almost unheard of this year. So it goes. They surely have the silver bullet, Matt.
Yeah, because this is, even going back to last season, the sprint races were his absolute Achilles heel, and it had been so woefully magnified this entire season. And to see him get a good start, the people behind get caught up in battling, and he was finally in his happy place. I'm at the front. I'm just laying down laps within tenths of each other, exactly on my run plan. I am not bothered by anything. And by time anyone got to looking like they might do something about it, he was ordering pizza and playing Game Boy on his dash.
Yep, he'd already checked out. So brilliant win for Bagnaia. Mark gets a nice second. It's all he needed to do. Acosta gets the K-team on the podium in third. Mir frustrated fourth. Morbidelli fifth. Quattararo sixth. For Alex Marquez, interestingly, slips out of the top 10 and gets mugged for the final point. So he's only in 10th. But that sets us up nicely for the Grand Prix review. So, as ever with these, we like to break them down into some major headline topics, and we have to talk about it first. People are probably sick to death for hearing about it, but we have the thing. A world champion is decided. The comeback is complete. Mark got the job done on the Sunday. A strong P2, and the emotions. The one thing I got was, I loved the celebrations when it come over the line. You just see him complete. I thought he would have been a little bit cooler, but you could just see the last sort of 6 years of hurt all just come out, and it floods out. And I really love how MotoGP do these celebrations, Adam. Like, it started with Quattararo, wasn't it? Like a few years ago, where they put the big screen up and showed him the video. I think it's a classy touch.
That was what, Misano? I think it's where they did it that year. Because for a while it was like they were doing something random, and it kind of started with the Marquez years where Dorna got involved to help kind of boost a little bit more of a celebratory thing. And where they did like kind of a projection and like a giant screen with the rider sitting there, so you get to see the reaction to it all. But one thing I wanted to mention was, did you guys watch that documentary that they put together about Marquez and kind of the injury? I forget what it was called, but it was a couple years ago. Yeah, it's where he talks about, like, you could see the emotion in that documentary. How he was just like breaking down, thinking about retiring, and that it was something that he was actually thinking of doing. And at the time, I thought that he was going to retire. Like, there's no coming back from this. And then so seeing his reaction to winning the championship, it just seemed like he kind of broke down mentally and kind of just went with it. It was cool to see. Matt.
Yeah, the thing that sticks with me about this is, and you wonder, someone who's had that much success, you'd think, given the points, it's just so inevitable. But it takes such a strength of character to actively win something, and to win it when you've been through what he's been through. And there had been only one other rider I'm aware of, and I can't remember his name right now because, of course, my brain is a marshmallow, who had a similar injury and had that operation and come back. And he lasted about a month, and he's like, nope, it is simply not possible. I was maybe 1 or 2% of the rider I was before this operation. So for him to be able to come back and be just even, participate in a race and just be vaguely competitive would have been pretty incredible. But to come back, work his way up to the best bike on the grid and win a championship he should have had, 5 years ago? 6 years ago? Nah, man, that was spectacular. And the other thing that really, I think, drove it home for me was they interviewed his brother. And he said, look, you guys have seen maybe 10% of what he really went through. And woof, man, it's just like getting smacked in the face with a hammer when you hear that.
Yeah, it was, for me, I'm a massive fan of the sport. I'm a fan of all riders, but I particularly, and it's a similar thing with Rossi as well. I followed them through 125s and the junior categories and up, and you kind of become invested in their career and you see everything that goes through. And after all of the journalists and the criticism, because when he first come back from the injury, he was still really broken. The arm was 34 degrees out of line. He was crashing. He was taking people out. He was getting slaughtered in the press by other riders. Everyone was like, oh yeah,
he had the double vision thing with his eyes. I felt like that was going to kind of stop his career before the arm, honestly.
Yeah, the diplopia, because he was smacking his head so hard that he was getting double vision, and that lost him his first Moto2 title. Didn't when he got the diplopia when it first came out, and he had to sit out. So, and it was just he was just broken, like absolutely broken. And Martinez, I think who was an ex-motocross rider, is now one of his personal sort of aides and helps him out, said that he was coming back from one of the rounds and said, I can't do this anymore, I'm going to retire. And they kind of talked him out of it, and I think he was fully done. So to hit the sort of the absolute bottom, the bottom of the barrel, like absolute despair, to come back from it and it all come out. So I really liked it. I think it was done in a sort of a classy manner. It was great. And even though, you said it was inevitable, but just the release, that's why I was surprised. I thought it would have been a bit more muted, and it just came out. And me personally, I found it hard not to get emotional sort of watching all of that, and it was I got really caught up in it. And especially later on in the evening, I watched it again after I was a couple of whiskeys deep, and I was struggling to keep on it. So
somebody was cutting really onions in the room.
Yeah, definitely. My partner was like, "Are you crying?" I'm like, nope, definitely not crying. Jules.
So you guys and regular listeners know that although I'm far from opposed to Marc Marquez or whatever, I always kind of like to, put a little break on the celebrations.
Right.
Yeah, but I too, I'd like to say the whole comeback narrative, at a certain point I felt like, okay, now we know it, and especially when it started to become like, oh, it's the biggest comeback ever in any sport. I mean, it's very hard to compare, but indeed I also felt touched by what actually went on prior to him getting off the bike, and when he was suddenly put in front of that giant screen, having to look at a kind of home video-esque montage of his career, But when he was still on the bike, and they opened up the mic that was on the bike, and you could like hear these really pure screams of I don't know, what do you feel at that point? Relief, victory over all of the things you went through, and I felt that was what was the purest thing, when he was all by himself. The Dutch comps mentioned this, like these like couple of 20-30 seconds when he was on that bike by himself, still rolling out on that lap after the finish. Those are the only moments he gets to be by himself before the madness starts, before everybody wants to smack your helmet and pat you on the back and surprise, here we are from coming behind of this big screen you've been watching. All these types of people who need to be there, I understand, but I felt that was really a really good moment, because on the Saturday he said, like, I am really tense, I'm not riding like myself, and like Matt just said, you think this guy has won so much, and he's looked so relaxed and at ease all season, you know. And everything he did, he went about with a smile and joking, but to be, this nervous and tense, even though I still have 5 races after this, doesn't matter what happens this weekend. Actually, I felt that really said something about how much indeed it meant to him. It to me says more than these montage videos trying to work on your emotions like they actually did. I admit
they're doing it on purpose, aren't they, to try and get it out of you, Adam?
Yeah, and so that's one thing that I've always kind of disliked about Dorna is they try to kind of push a specific narrative or specific hashtag and little things. And the whole thing about the comeback, I mean, yeah, it's an epic comeback. I'm going to say one of the greatest. I wouldn't say the greatest like Dorna.
Fair. I don't think it's the greatest, no.
What comes to mind for you out of instinct? I'm just curious.
Doohan and Nicky Lauda. And Michael Doohan.
Robert Kubica is the other one that comes to mind for me, with his, not similar situation, but, the arm, and then coming back to F1, winning 24 Hours of Le Mans this year. I mean, there's a lot of stories like that. And that's why I don't like to compare these things. And I just felt like I was being forced to compare them all weekend. And that's one thing that I'm just like, kind of tired of by the end of it.
Yeah, it was kind of shoved down and let everyone's throats a bit kind of thing. But it is up there, and I think you're exactly right. I think it is one of the greatest sporting comebacks that we have seen, and I think they were really cashing in on that. So that's why I liked it at the end when they didn't really go on about the comebacks complete. And we'll finish up on this little topic. I loved the little dig at Liberty Media at the end, and their whole thing saying it's more than just a number, and then him very proudly holding up 9 fingers for his 9 world titles. Adam.
So yeah, one thing to touch on that is a lot of people, especially like if you're a new fan, welcome to the sport. But Moto3 and Moto2, they're not regional championships. They're not domestic championships. They race at every track every same weekend as MotoGP. These are world championships. They're not anything, lesser than, other than the size of the bike. There's no point in trying to do away with these statistics. It just doesn't make sense.
Yeah, and this is the thing that coming to the sport recently has really struck me about Moto2 and Moto3, especially if you're in a place where you can just put it on and watch them unfold. This whole thing is an ecosystem, and they all feed off of and support each other. You can't just go chopping off, you get rid of those bees, they're a pain, let's just kill them all. No, everything crashes. You starve to death. And I think it's the same way, not just because you're training talent up as riders, you're training talent up as engineers, the public, like all of these roles exist in all of these teams. And you've got this constant learning from each other across the board, because let's face it, like if you ask me to do social media stuff, I'm going to get my daughter who's 21 to do it for me because I don't know bupkis about that stuff. So I feel like and they see each other in the paddock. There's constant talk. And it's just, it was mind blowing to me for you to inform me of that, Kyle, that Liberty was like, oh, well, no, and you've got it completely wrong. These are not feeder series. They deserve their own place in the paddock and on the track, and the manufacturers make bikes those sizes. Like it's across the board. It's a synergy that works for everybody. And that's why Dorna has spent the money to keep the independent teams rolling in these series.
Yeah, and it's great, and it's a major part of MotoGP, and it has been for years. And Liberty, I think, have already tried to kick Moto2 and Moto3 out of the pit lane. So they used to come and have pit garages. They're trying to move it out and have this focus on MotoGP, and it has not been met well. And they're trying to make it more like F1 and aspire to F1, where the other way, Formula One and wheel racing should aspire to be like the MotoGP model, where the support classes are not support classes. They're world championships, revered world championships in their own right, and this is what I love. So when you have, like, when Rossi got to, what was a 500 at the time, he was a 2-time world champion, very highly respected. Biaggi was a 4-time world champion when he got into, like, the main class. Marquez is a 2-time world champion. are you trying to tell me that those championships don't count now? And this is kind of the narrative Liberty was pushing. So I love the little dig. We'll move on now for the market, but I love the little dig because all of the journalists, I think, have been put under pressure to not mention 9. They were trying to say 7 because he had 7 MotoGP titles, but he was very adamant in saying 9. And then the more than just a number thing, double meaning. I loved all that. So we'll move on now to the next subject. I could have rambled about that too much. Return of the bag. I want to focus in on now. So Bagnaia, it's true, Jules. This must be the silver bullet. It's here. We've said it so many times. What did they change on that bike?
So Ducati have gone out of their way and beyond to not specifically mention the changes on the bike, but even Bagnaia, Dall'Igna, Tardozzi, whoever in the media, they haven't gone into detail about what changed. The closest we got was Tardozzi saying, "Yeah, we mixed them up." So GP24 bits, GP25 bits. If you go from other media reports, pretty soon in the weekend, it was clear that he went back to more 24 aero. He already ran the whole season with the front fairings GP24 aero, as opposed to Digi and Marquez running GP25 aero. But also the rear end. After a couple of races this season, they added some winglets to that. He reverted back to what's on the GP24s. Apart from that, apparently ride height device reverted. Front fork reverted to the ones he used last season, and swing arm also reverted. So it sounds like they built him a GP24 on the 25 chassis with a 25 engine. But what I find more interesting is, I mean, the question you have after this weekend is like, why didn't they do this sooner? You know, well, I mean, these bits were here. These bits were here, Adam.
So quick tinfoil hat it was all a conspiracy. The bike was set up for Marquez to win the championship. Now that it's going to get sealed up, now we can allow Bagnaia to ride the bike.
Right. You know what? Okay, here I go. Finish a sentence, Jules. The thing that I found really remarkable was Pecco was happy, afterwards. He was happy, and he was really clear in saying, I just want to enjoy this moment and not think about things too much. But he also said, and going from various media reports, journals who were there, for the post-television interviews, but for the printed press media interviews, that he was angry, that he had something angry in him. And we all know, if you see Pecco saying things, if he's not really distraught, but he says something like, angry, he still says it with a smile. But these reports say he was angry that this didn't happen sooner. We could have done these things sooner. This championship could have looked different. My season could have been different. And I find it really remarkable, because that sounds to me like, why didn't they listen to me sooner? Why didn't they do the things I asked for, or acted on my remarks sooner? And it all goes back to that Misano test. And if you followed it a bit, you know that Casey Stoner was there all weekend. He was there for the Monday test. It is well documented how much he interacted with Stoner about it. And he kept mentioning Stoner, but above all, their rider coach. And excuse me, I forgot the name, but he kept mentioning that guy. And I don't want to. Yeah, exactly, Poggiali. And I don't want to cast any shadow about how great his weekend has been, but why the anger? Why is he a bit?
Just frustration, though, isn't it?
Yeah,
it's just purely frustrated, Matt. Like he's like, oh, why couldn't I have this earlier? But it may be a case that he hadn't thought about doing these earlier either. Who knows?
Well, I do love this, and I appreciate the very well run down bits, because some of them were obvious. To me, the rear is, I get some interest there because that's a lot of times where they put the inerter, and it's a different size and it's a different shape. So that makes me wonder a little bit. But he's always complained foremost about the front end feel. And from descriptions I've heard and read, they worked to try and reduce the snap you get when the rear wheel regrips. If you've loosened the rear wheel to turn the bike better, you've got more force on the front. But when the rear wheel comes back into line, it takes the force off of that and you get a little snap. And they had identified that as a weak point of the 24, and that it made the bike a little unstable. And so they softened, maybe used a different material, maybe removed some material in that handlebar fork area to try and improve that characteristic. And my sense is that simply took away the feedback Bagnaia needed to be precise on the brakes in the way that lets him drive the way we saw this past weekend. As to the Misano test, it's also kind of interesting. He sort of halfway mentioned that every other time he's had a chance to get on a bike and try some different combinations of things, he's had a weekend where some part of it has gone well. And that Misano was the first time that he had an excellent negative comparison. So they had this is him, and this is exactly where it's really tragically bad, and we can see it in the data. And so it made it easier for them to pick through parts. But the other thing to consider here is how little preseason testing Ducati actually got to begin with because of the concessions. Cheap. And we didn't see it so much with Mark because Mark has that adaptability around the issue, sort of to diagnose it and figure out how to push the tires so they work the way they're supposed to is really what I'm going to go with here. But without the feedback, Bagnaia couldn't do it. And they didn't have enough testing to catch it and fix it before the season started. And were it not for Mark, imagine how close the championship would be right now. Imagine what would we be even talking about? Boy. Alex would be in front, right?
Yeah.
I mean, it'd be mental. But anyway, I digress. It's taken them this long to fix it, partially because they were already so far ahead.
Yeah, good point. They haven't had the opportunity to do it. They don't get much testing at all. And if the rumours are to be believed, he's basically got a 24 fork, which is essentially his 23 fork as well that he wanted. Swing arm as well, maybe. And it's on the 25 chassis and engine. So I'm wondering whether they've had to manufacture more parts for him to do that. And they've had to alter a few things to get them to work on this chassis. And also, it might have taken a bit of time to get that thing, but he hasn't had time to actually fully test it. And he said himself in Thailand, he was like, we basically just threw away the whole Thailand test at the start of the season because he was really slow and he was struggling his feeling and lost his way and he didn't really test. So it's one thing is really, really good that he has now found it. They've found it for him. It gives him a good base for next year because Jules, already, Marcus said he spent the Misano test on setting up for the end of season test, already thinking about next year.
Yeah, and that's not going to get any less now he's secured the title and he's just going to work towards the 26 bike. And that's the... there are two things that are asterisks for me about Pecco's results this weekend. One is it's Motegi, and it's a very heartbreaking track, and you need front end feel. So if anything was shaky about what he had this weekend, it should have shown. So that's convincing, but. Let's wait for another track like Mandalika next weekend. See what happens there. But also, on the long run, if you revert back to a 24 machine so much, and then you need to make a step to a 26 machine, I just hope for Pecco's sake that he's convinced them to kind of make a 24-esque 26 bike instead of going on further with the evolution of the 25. But yeah, let's see. I still feel the weird thing is how off this bike was for him, because he mentioned that on the Friday at Motegi this weekend, they still got him 2 bikes. One, the bike that he's ridden all season, and one, the bike as he had in the Misano test.
Hybrid bike, yeah.
Yeah. And still, apparently, they wanted to be convinced by Pecco and by his performance that it was really the bike and not Pecco's head or anything. And then on Friday, and then Friday, Motegi just proved what they saw on the Monday at Misano. And then Friday to Saturday, they switched his second bike to this 24 spec, and things went off like we saw this weekend.
And last, I'm just going to say I feel pretty vindicated for having sat here weekend after weekend and saying, no, I don't think Pecco has lost it. I think he's there, but he's just searching for a solution, because a lot of people were, as Jules pointed out, just saying, oh, it's all in his head. He's just lost his way. Mark has destroyed him. Nope. You don't get to be a world champion and just have that happen to you. So
no,
hopefully we see it next week in Mandalika, and the 26 bike will be fearsome, but equally challenged by KTM and Aprilia and Honda. And, well,
Absolutely.
why not Yamaha while I'm asking for Christmas favors?
Yeah, let's hope he hasn't put himself into a blind alley, Adam.
And way less smoke, please.
Yes, geez, yeah, we have to talk about that because we're rambling loads.
I thought there was going to be a new Pope.
Oh my God, it must be terrified for the riders behind. Mark said he was like backing off, and I think Pecco was losing power at the end, so God knows what that was. I don't know if it was a cracked piston ring or something. Scary, scary stuff. I'm so happy they didn't meatball flag him and getting to come off, because that would have been absolutely heartbreaking. So well done for pointing that out. And also, wrap up on the Bagnaia point that he's now only, inverted commas, 66 points behind Alex, and this looks like the momentum is with him. And with Bezzecchi having a nightmare, Bezzecchi's gone from 8 points behind him now to 32. So Bagnaia, from looking like he was going to lose third in the championship, P2 might actually be on, because the last 4 rounds, 8 races combined, he only scored 24 points. He's just nailed 37 points in this round alone. So, wow, what a turnaround. And he can actually go for P2 in the championship. And one last thing I want to say about him, absolute class act from him, celebrating with Mark and saying the first words that come out of his mouth was not about himself. He was like, I don't want to take anything away from Mark. Like, well done. Like, the guy is an absolute class act. And it's so nice to see him back in the fray again. So, tell you what, who is a class act? If you think we're a class act and you like the show, you can give us a like and a subscribe on YouTube. Or if you're an audio-only listener, then maybe give us a favourable rating on your podcast platform of choice. Perhaps you'd like to tell us how wrong we are, or we're not a class act and we're totally the opposite, or give us a bit of feedback. Then you can do that as well. You can send us an email at mrapexmoto@gmail.com. That's mrapexmoto, all one word, @gmail.com. It'd be great to hear from you, and we will hopefully be in touch with you soon. We try to reply to everything. So, our third topic will go in. We have to talk about it. Johan Mir not only stayed on the bike, but a podium on a Honda. We thought it would never happen, Jules. Like, incredible. I'm so happy. It's the first time I think I've seen him smile for, well, ever, really.
Yeah, we sometimes mention, like, guys, this is a world champion, you know, and it may have been the COVID season with a shortened calendar, but still, it is a MotoGP world champion. He's not done himself a lot of favors by crashing out so much, but that's also what Marc Marquez did on Honda, you know, crashing a lot. He's not been, you know, in the most nice painted picture this season, because Luca Marini was performing so well in recent races, and Joan Mir was a bit more on and off. But to do this for the home crowd, it was amazing. And you know what made it even, you know, better even, because you'd almost forget that at Misano 2 weeks ago. He had this crash on the Friday, I think, where he severely hurt his neck, and it made him skip the Saturday. And then he came back for the Sunday race. It lasted like two corners or something, and he of course crashed out. So he missed that Misano test, and then to come back here and pull this out of that Honda was really nice to see, because he comes across as a really nice, sympathetic guy. But to do it on merit on Saturday, I felt a bit sorry for him, because he started the sprint really well, but then kind of fell back. He fell off the podium, but on Sunday he just looked convincingly there, and we said this often, but to see Honda struggle so much.
Right. So I have a quick question, and then I have a follow-up, which was the biggest miracle this weekend? Marquez championship, Bagnaia pole and double win, or Mir getting the podium?
I think Mir's pace was just a surprise, where he was able to keep it on two wheels and keep the bike actually competitive up front. I feel like that was the biggest thing. I really wanted him to get his first pole position, because I don't think he has a pole position at all in his career. And to seeing him up front and not crashing, it was kind of a real, especially at Honda's home race in Japan. I feel like that was something just quite special, a little bit of a notch in his belt for his career and hopefully his future contract negotiations. But I think he might be a little careful, and if he gets that bike into a race winning position, then Mark might come back to Honda and take another championship from it.
Oh, tinfoil! We like a bit of tinfoil here.
Yes.
we may have some off-season content coming where we can discuss some of these and rivalries, and we've got a bit of tinfoil. But that's what podcasting is all about. We like diverse range of opinions here. So I love that little curveball.
It's all tongue in cheek.
Oh, absolutely.
Only
but
joking,
great
but seriously.
discussion points. I know you're semi-serious as well. This is the funny thing, but this is brilliant. So we'll move on there from Honda. We've been going on for far too long, as normal. There's a few honourable mentions to do. We've got Acosta, we haven't mentioned too much, but personally I think he was way over the limit on Sunday. He pretty much almost ran off to the car park and needed his ticket to get back in the end. Drastically faded and it just pushing too hard, I think. And poor Iagura, after getting points in the sprint, his hand injury from Misano was still hurting him, and he had to pull out of his home Grand Prix. So that was really sad to see. So we'll go on to the standings and finish up. Well, it's kind of irrelevant, really. The championship's over. Mark's gone and away, but it's now the hot battle for P2 with 66 points between Alex Marquez and Francesco Bagnaia. So as always, we like to finish up with giving some awards, and we'll start off with Rider of the Weekend. Matt, I'm going to go to you first, nice and short, so you can't steal anyone. Well, you will
I can
be
steal
stealing
everyone's. Ha!
Exactly.
It all belongs to me.
Bad move, but shoot.
Rider of the Weekend. Wow. Dang, man. Yeah, I like to always look to the left field, but yeah, geez. Tee it up over home plate for me with a curveball that doesn't break. It's got to be Marc Marquez. Jeez, the amount of pressure he's been under for so long, the depths he's fought back from, and it's all right there. And in the back of your head, there's always that little demon saying, all you got to do is just let a little too fast in that corner. And you got to do it again next weekend. And the next weekend, the not being able to finish it. Oh, that is a weight. That is a weight on your shoulders.
Fair play. That was going to be mine. Adam, who's your rider of the weekend?
I'm going to go with Mir. Putting that Honda back up front, that was very good to see. I feel like people put a little bit of asterisk on his career, but I feel like if Suzuki was still around, he would have been fighting for more wins, and he would be up there. And so it's good to see that he's got a bike capable of putting him up front, because I think he really deserves to be there.
Yep, definitely hard to argue with that. Jules, who is yours?
So I'm going to go with a not obvious one and mention Franco Morbidelli, because he finished in 5th both races, qualified 6th, and sneakily, I mean, you can say a lot of things about him, and we did this season, but he sneakily climbed up to P5 in the standings, leaving behind him Pedro Acosta and his GP25 teammate, Digi.
Oh, that's a good point, because that's a nice little battle brewing in the title as well. So that's another one. We've got P3 going on, but yeah, this massive battle between them, and yes, the GP24 versus the GP25. That is a great one. Okay, so my turn. I'm actually going to go for another slightly left field one, and that's Raul Fernandez, who had a really strong weekend on the Aprilia as well. He was 8th in the sprint, and he was 7th in the main Grand Prix again, and he's been coming stronger and stronger and stronger. So Raul Fernandez is mine. Now, we'll finish off on moment of the weekend. We're going to go to Trumpets last on this one. Adam, I'll go to you first.
My moment of the weekend is not really a moment, more of a thing, but I loved Marc Marquez's helmet. I've always been super into helmets and the special one-offs, and this one did not have his traditional La Hormiga, like the ant, and it just reminded me of like the old World Superbike days with colorful, awesome designs of helmets that weren't so...
The 90s.
Yes, it looked epic. I loved it, and I loved all the shine. I bet that thing looks so good in the sun. Yeah, I've always been into helmets since I was a kid, and MotoGP really highlights them, and so that was one of the coolest things for me. The only bad thing about it is it's covered in all those brands, and I can't wait for them to put out a production unit without the Lenovo and Monster Energy logos, and it's going to look so much better.
That's cool. That's a good. I like that one. That's a bit of a different one. That's brilliant. I like that. Jules.
I'm going to go with the smoke from Pecco's machine. Not to make this about Pecco, but because it put Mark in such a jeopardy, really, if there would be oil on the track. But also to see how invested the Ducati pit wall was in not having this resulting in a black flag for Pecco, and it really showed how they really wanted this to work for the whole team. And Tardozzi shouting that was on the Saturday, but still like uno due, like the 1-2, which they hardly maybe not had this season yet. So that was my thing of the weekend.
It is. And I'm feeling generous and nice. Matt, you can go before me.
Right. So you need to understand that I have repurposed this, because this was going to be my honorable mention. But by far, the best moment of the weekend was after the sprint race when Mark was being interviewed. That bug whacked him in the face. None of you saw this? And yeah, he's like, what the word I can't say on this broadcast is that? And it was just this perfect moment. You literally think fly in the ointment. It's the perfect thing. And then suddenly out of nowhere, the whole thing gets derailed. And it just, I think it encapsulated exactly where his head was. Because the reaction relative to the stimulus was just wild.
Nice. And we'll finish on my one then. My one, it has to be the standing in front of the screen and watching the montage of your career. And one particular moment of that, when he drops down to his knees, when they show the Jerez crash, and they show him bouncing through the gravel, and you can see him just crack at that moment when he's seeing it, and absolutely crack. So that particular moment, and to follow on to tag it onto the end, and slightly a bit of Honda as well. He made a comment in one of the press conferences afterwards saying it's just a perfect result. I'm here as one of our first 1-2s we've had, but also my Honda team is up here as well in the podium, and you see all the Honda guys congratulating him. That's still part of his family. So I think there's something to Adam's little tinfoil hat sort of theory. I still think Mark will go back to Honda because they're still his family, and he mentioned them and saying it was the perfect thing that they are on the podium as well. So I thought that was all warm fuzzy feeling territory. So you will give my panel some warm fuzzy feelings if you go and follow them on social media. Adam, where can people get you?
You can find me on Instagram at adam.grandprixtravel. I'm about to embark on a bit of a journey through the Americas, going to, I think, 6 races in about 6 weeks. It's going to be ridiculous. So if you're at Motocross of Nations next week in Indiana, shoot me a message. We can have a beer or something. And then a few F1 races, and also the World Supercross up in Vancouver next month. So feel free to follow me, and I'll be posting some pictures and meeting up with some people and having a few drinks.
That's awesome. What's the point even of having a house, Adam? Because you're never there. You're always around the world going to some sort of event.
Quick little story this weekend. While I had a friend at the Nürburgring, and he was sending me videos of Max Verstappen, driving around in Nordschleife. And I'm watching these videos as I wake up on mute while my partner's asleep. And I live close enough to Circuit of the Americas where a track day started right when I'm watching these videos on mute. And I can just hear cars from my bedroom. And I just love it. Yes, I am all over the place, but there's little things that bring me some joy, and that's one of them.
Awesome. It runs in your veins. Jules, where can people get you?
I don't live such a romantic moto life as Adam does, but you can find me on Blue Sky, and my handle is Jules on Racing.
All right, Matt, where can people get you?
As always, I'm at MattPT55 on almost every one of your socials. So, say hi.
Excellent. And always follow the show. Give us a follow. We're Missed Apex Moto on YouTube. We'll be back again next week to review the Indonesian GP, and hopefully it's gloves off. We're going to have some battling between the teammates. As always, thanks for listening to Missed Apex MotoGP.